So even among folks who are, interested and invested in, raising children to be bilingual or multilingual, you'll still hear some anxiety about how to do it. And one of the big ones is whether the languages would again compete with each other and confuse the child. And so I'll answer the part about the confusion, which is no, it won't. And also, make a pitch for this is how bilingual, multilingual people think and speak, is that they actually move between languages, they layer languages on top of each other. There's not like this clear boundary where you get confused. In fact, you're living in the creation of new ways of languaging. And if you're in a community that are all collectively, creating these languaging practices, then it's actually, you're actually fitting in with the culture, right? There are different places that have different versions of Spanglish, for example. That the Northern California version might sound very different from Texas. And so it's actually important for us to be in that fluidity. And so, no, there is no confusion. I think what people perceive as speakers being confused is really speakers just being creative and adaptive. And so there's nothing wrong with that cognitively or developmentally. Now, what I do want to say about the keeping language separate is that a lot of these things, like what is being considered as a developmental matter, they're really like socio-political matters. And so that's where things get very kind of, I think, confusing for people to think through, is we do create rigid boundaries between languages. That's not a cognitive thing. That's a social thing. If I start speaking Chinese to you during a lecture, I'm going to lose a lot of you, right? And children know that as well. They feel those we feel those boundaries because they're socially created, and there's some pushback when we don't respect those boundaries. Speaking this language here, or speaking like a improper form of Spanish with grandma, when they're expecting a certain kind of Spanish and you speak another. All of these things can have consequences. And so we know it as people in the world. So that's where the boundaries come from. So code switching, this idea of like, okay, I'm going from this thing that has been bounded in this way by this circumstance to this thing. I'm going to switch from formal English into less formal English, or I'm going to switch into Mandarin because I'm with my dad, but not the kind of really slangy Mandarin that I use with, younger folks and friends. And so we make these calculations. The other thing, so code switching is real. We are not confused. It is not a bad thing. The other thing that's worth talking about is, because the pressure towards English and to lose our non-English languages that we have in our lives is so strong, that if you kind of take an anything goes attitude, really the most predictable outcome is that English will take over. Children, as soon as they start kindergarten, even if they didn't speak any English before they arrived in that first day of class, within 6 months to a year, you'll see their English is rapidly improving. And sometimes, whether it's by circumstance or by choice, they stop speaking the home language, or they speak it less and less. You can really see a quick drop off. And I think a lot of parents are surprised how fast it happens. Some children even, as they enter this English dominant environment, they realize, oh, this is the power language. I mean, even children know that too. And they can choose not to speak the home language, even if they understand. They just they'll just answer back in English. Maybe many of you in this class have had that experience, of going through periods of not wanting to speak your home language. I know I did. I went through that period where I wasn't proud of it. I just I didn't see it as an asset, so when my parents spoke to me in Mandarin, especially if we're out in public, I would speak back in English just because that was how I was trying to manage people's impression of me, in the outside. So these things happen. And so something that families may want to do is, in fact, be rigid about their language use and carve time and space out for their home languages and insist that when you come into this house, we speak this language as a way of preserving it. You see that also in bilingual education, is that because the imbalance in power is so big, that bilingual immersion schools will usually start out with 80% the non-English language. So if it's Spanish bilingual immersion, you might see a school at the kindergarten, first grade, it's like 80% Spanish, 20% English during the day. And then over the years, as the kids go up in grade and that foundation is more solid for the Spanish or any other non-English language, they might shift gradually to 50-50. But you have to stack the odds in favor of the home language. Otherwise, it's just very vulnerable.